thought we'd just start this interview off by having you explain who you are, what Clive and Wrench is, an introduction for people in case they don't know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my name's Rob, and this is Clive N Wrench. It's the first game I've ever developed, and I probably should have chosen something a little bit smaller, but it's a 3D platformer. So, in for a penny, in for a pound, I suppose. And yeah, it's a 3D platform about time travel, and you play as Clive a rabbit and Wrench the monkey, literally on his back, as they try and stop an evil doctor from taking over. So that as deliberately cliche as you can get as far as.
So what sets them off on this event? You said to stop a doctor, but what has this doctor done that's so bad that they have to go through time to stop him?
So Clive's cousin Nancy invents a time machine, but is far too trusting of the world and leaves her blueprints out in the open. So the evil Dr. Dorcas sets one of his minions to steal the blueprints to invent his own time machine, and then travels back in time to insert himself into very well-known civilizations throughout time so that he can make a profit, basically.
Okay. So
she feels guilty and enlists them both to help her stop him, so that
stop him from changing history and all that.
Yeah, Back to the Future style.
Yeah. Oh, the game. So it's a 3D platformer and it's a collectathon. I can see you picking up something, but I'm not 100% sure what it is from the footage. What are the collectibles in this game?
So the main ones you see floating around are basically like timepieces, watches.
Oh, like pocket watches. Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Pocket watches, yeah. So they're basically like the time machine has a way of visualizing tears in time space, and that's why they look like watches. So by collecting them, you're basically repairing the time stream, which means you can then unlock like different time periods to go to.
Okay, makes sense. And this was something I was going to ask as well, but it's also brought up in our chat just now. I've seen you've taken the idea of animal mascots to heart with this one, but why is it a rabbit and a monkey? What's the connection there? What was the idea behind that?
So initially, when I started the game, there was no Wrench. It was just Clive on his own.
Okay.
And it's as boring as I was thinking of animals that jump high, and a rabbit came to mind.
Hey, you got to think
practically.
So I just went with it,
and it kind of stuck. And as far as Wrench, when Clive's moveset started getting too big, I tried to give him like a glove, and then he had a jetpack, and suddenly it felt really odd that he had all of these extra tools, and I couldn't really explain why he would have them. So it made sense to introduce a second character. And then, of course, the pun of having a monkey on your back was too good to resist. So he became monkey. And then, because it's puns, he's also then a monkey Wrench as well.
Oh, yeah, I get that. I didn't even think about that, but that is a good pun.
Basically, the answer to everything in this game is, why does that exist? Because there's a pun. That's really it.
I think that's always a classic for platformers and stuff. But I think it's a good way to get inspiration. Just play wordplay to the extreme.
Oh, I mean, half the characters in the game only exist because of that. There's a vampire called Vlad the Impala, who is an impala, and he only exists because I thought that was hilarious.
Hey, that is a good way. That is a good way to come up with characters and character designs. I like it. So, because Wrench then was brought in to replace stuff like jetpacks and all this, I'm assuming Clive and Wrench, they can learn abilities throughout the game, like as it goes on, or do they have the whole arsenal from the start?
So I'm not a big fan of backtracking at least forced backtracking.
Yeah.
So my intent from the beginning has always been that they have all the moves to start with. So if you're a seasoned 3D platformer fan or you've played the game before, you can jump right in and everything's available. It doesn't feel restrictive.
Oh, nice.
So the levels instead often contain like a unique mechanic or a way to combine those moves in a new way. So hopefully it should feel a bit more organic than, oh, now suddenly you can double jump and you have to relearn the muscle memory.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty good. I think there's it's really good for speedrunning as well. I'm reminding of a game, not a 3D platform in this one, but Toki Tori, which gave you all the abilities you could do at the start, but you had to learn how to use them throughout the game. But if you knew how to use them, you could like skip like big chunks of the game really early on.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And yeah, it's a kind of a similar philosophy then. In that, and I have actually also made sure in a lot of places that speedrunning is for. So you can do any NPC quest without talking to the NPC if you know what to do.
Oh,
like
that's good. So stuff isn't just
mainly
activated from the start. Like, stuff isn't just activated from speaking to people and setting off triggers. It's activated from as soon as you enter the level.
Yeah, exactly. And I can explain it away in story terms by saying, well, it's time travel, so maybe they already knew that because they've
Yeah, because they've heard about it in the future.
Yeah.
So that because a lot of 3D platformers do stuff very differently like that. That reminds me a lot of like Banjo-Kazooie, where everything was sort of available from the start, as opposed to say Mario Sunshine, where everything only became available once you picked the specific level that it was required for. And so that makes me wonder what sort of 3D platformers did inspire you. Was it something? Because this isn't quite like something like Croc or Croc, where it was straightforward line. It feels more like the open worldness of Banjo-Kazooie and Gex, but these worlds seem much bigger, maybe even Banjo-Tooie-esque. So, well, I was curious what 3D platformers you had played that sort of inspired the direction of this.
I think you probably wouldn't be able to name a 3D platformer that hasn't inspired something. It's kind of been a case of playing through a 3D platformer and asking myself, what do I like about this game that I can reference, let's say, for myself? But I think the easiest way to describe it is probably like the gameplay of Jak and Daxter meets the world design of Spyro.
Okay,
so you've got like free-flowing cartoony movement mixed with like open world sections.
Actually, yeah, now that you say Jak and Daxter, I can kind of see it. Same for sort of Ratchet and Clank, the sort of PlayStation 2 era 3D platformers, that kind of openness.
Yeah, well, I was much more of a PlayStation kid, so I think a lot of my influence comes from there. But obviously later on I played things like Banjo and the Mario games and all that kind of thing. So I've taken on board certain design philosophies from that as well. So a fair bit of Sunshine in here because it's my favourite of the Mario games, despite maybe a controversial opinion. But yeah, the levels are pretty large, but I don't think they're too big. Some of them have even ended up being scaled back because I always felt like Banjo-Tooie was really fun and I enjoyed it, but some of the levels felt a little bit too big. So I've tried to make sure that I don't build an area unless I can justify it being there. And with things to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. There are ways to fast travel between the areas of the world, if need be, like the teleportation pads, I think, in Banjo.
There's no fast travel, but there are checkpoints throughout the level. So if you fall off a ledge or an enemy knocks you out, you'll respawn at whichever checkpoint you were last at. But the levels are also mainly built as like a big loop, so you end up pretty much where you start.
So it's pretty easy to backtrack to different areas then, like if it needed be.
Yeah, if need be. Although they are built with it in mind that you shouldn't actually ever have to backtrack.
Yeah,
If you know what you're doing, you can go all the way through and
one turn and grab everything. That's cool. That's good. That's definitely because I'm all for that collecting 100%. And the worst thing in a 3D platformer is having to go, constantly make a trek across the world to pick up one thing because you grab something and now you can go do something else, and you're just constantly going back and forth the same areas.
oh yeah, you and me both. That's precisely what I've built not do. And it's even got I don't know if you know, in Spyro there's a mechanic where you can use sparks to help you find any gems you've missed.
Yes.
And so in this, there's a like you tap up on the D-pad, and a little radar dish pops out of your backpack, and it will show you wherever the nearest watch is, so you can avoid any of those headaches of where's the last one.
Oh, that's really good. That's a really good quality of life choice for this game.
Yeah,
appreciated from a guy who will definitely be 100%ing this game.
That's one of those user feedback things of I spent an hour playing the level and then I spent another hour looking for one watch. Can you please?
Speaking about some other 3D platforms and stuff, I know. So this game started development in 2011, I believe. And back then, 3D platformers was certainly a dying thing. It was really only Nintendo and Mario that were keeping up, and even then Nintendo was doing stuff like 3D Land, which isn't quite the same.
Yeah, definitely.
And I believe that's why you started developing this, right? Because the 3D platformers genre was had been a long time missing.
Yeah, basically, I spent a lot of my time moaning to people that they don't make my favorite games anymore. And since nothing was being done about it at the time, I decided, well, how hard could making a game possibly be? And then just try. And of course, it took a decade, but I got there, I think.
Yeah, you made it there. But also, since that time in 2011, there have been a number of other 3D platformers that have come out, like A Hat in Time and Yooka-Laylee. And we've even got remakes of older ones, like that SpongeBob remake that just came out. So we seem to be in some sort of 3D platform renaissance. And has this influenced your thoughts and the development of Clive N Wrench at all, or is it still envisioned as you expected it to be back in 2011?
Well, I mean, at the risk of sounding arrogant, it proves I was right. There is an audience for it. It's not that nobody wants these type of games. It's just that nobody was making. But I mean, I've played through most of those games you talked about, and I don't know if they've influenced me, because by the time they came out, I was already well deep into development of this. But I would certainly say that the talk around it and reviews and discussions that people have had about the pros and cons of what a modern 3D platform it is has informed some choices, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Things like you say, the quality of life of having abilities that allow you to find missing items and that kind of thing just takes away some of the frustrations that the 90s platformers became known for.
Yeah, something that I think some other games didn't do. I know a lot of people criticize Play for being too close to the 90s platformer style of things when it came out.
Yeah, it's just trying to find the right balance between old and new.
Yeah.
At least that's the hope.
At least that's what the game's. It's what you're hoping to get. Yeah. So, this has been a one-man project pretty much, I think. I know you've had some outside help from some people, like the artist, I think was Luigi Lucarelli. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I apologize if I have not. And you had an outside studio.
So, yeah.
And you had an outside studio to do the music as well, Wishwood, I think that's how it's pronounced.
Yep, that's correct.
But as the sole developer, what benefits and negatives are there for this, especially a 3D platform? It's a lot bigger than something like a 2D sprite-based platformer.
Yeah, well, I think probably, and I'm sure there are quite a number of people that would agree, that the biggest drawback is how long it's taken me to because it's if I decide today I'm going to work on character design, then that means that nothing else gets done. There's no level being built that day. There's no animation being done. So obviously that takes a bit of but then of course what that also means is if I decide suddenly that, oh, this would be a cool thing to implement, and I can just do it, and it's not like I have to sit in a meeting and convince 7 people that that would be a good idea. I can just
You can just
do
what you think is
shoot
best.
it at the wall and see if it sticks. Yeah.
It's like, there's not too many cooks here. There's one cook who gets to decide what's in the soup.
Yeah. I just hope that people like my cooking, because otherwise.
Yeah, well, it sounds like from the chat and everything that a lot of people do. We actually got a donation during this $10 where someone said, "I can't wait to play Clive N Wrench on my Switch."
Oh, that's great.
Good. And I guess that's a good segue into something, because this is coming to the Nintendo Switch and PC, and the Switch does feel like a great platform for this. But obviously, this began development in 2011, which was even before the Wii U was announced. So Switch wasn't clearly not the original platform that you had in mind for this. So I'm wondering, was it always intended to be PC and consoles, or just PC originally and consoles is something that's come around later? What's the thoughts?
I mean, in honesty, when I started doing it, I didn't ever think it would actually become a game. It was an experiment to see if I could do a thing, and then it eventually became something that I became more confident with. And PC was always the initial idea. Then the opportunity to get it on Wii U came about, so I took that. But then, of course, that didn't do so well for Nintendo. So I switched focus just back to PC and figured, I'll worry about consoles later. But then the opportunity came up again to get it onto Switch instead. And given that it was sort of a question I would get nearly daily on Twitter or Facebook or wherever it was from somebody would be, bring it to Switch. When are you going to do that? So it's a pretty natural fit.
And is the Switch thing thanks to your publisher Numskull Games? Because originally I think there wasn't an intention to have a publisher. I think I think it was going to be self-published on PC, but now you do. Numskull Games are helping you publish this, release a physical version of it as well, which must be very exciting for you. So I was wondering, is it because of them that we're getting a Switch version, or are they here to support you? What other support have they given you in this?
I mean, they asked what I wanted to do, and given that I'd approached a publisher, my initial hope was PC and Switch because it was the two most logical / requested platforms, and they agreed. So it worked out quite nicely. And that was one of the reasons I approached a publisher in the first place. That's among a number of other things. But that seemed like if I didn't have to worry about, the behind the scenes of
all the distribution stuff and the ad stuff and all that.
Exactly, and convincing Nintendo that an unproven indie developer with no games under his belt was worth taking a punt on.
Yeah. And it seems like they're doing a good job of it, because everything seems to be going right smoothly, and the Switch version's confirmed and is coming out this year, and is also getting a physical, which is exciting. Yeah. Always fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it all seems to be going pretty well so far. Of course, with our current situation in the world, it's a little bit more difficult, but I think we're still there. Yeah.
Although, I suppose you've been working from home anyway on your computer this time, so it must have helped to lessen distractions from the outside
world. Well, it has
world.
A little bit. Well, it was, but then, of course, the neighbours are all home, so suddenly it's a little bit more distracting. But, I'm sure I'm a lot better off than a lot of people.
Someone asked in the chat, where can we buy the physical games for this?
Oh, right, okay. It's all over the place, but if you check Numskull Games' website, they've got like a concise list of all the retailers on there.
Okay. That's good. I'm sure people... I was just talking with Brian Brown, who I think you have met before because he used to work at Numskull. talking
Yeah, he
about
used to
getting
be too.
physical copies of stuff and how things are going much more digital now. So it's going to be
Oh yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say with getting physical stuff and all that, and with all that shift, it might start getting harder and harder to find physical stuff. But it's a good thing that there are people out there still making them, because there are people who still want.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have those same memories of driving home in the back of the car, reading through a manual, waiting to play the game, kind of thing. And I guess part of the dream of making a game is that, some kid somewhere might have that same experience with my game.
Yeah.
And obviously, in a digital world, that's not really a thing that happens all that often, especially for indie games. So yeah, the fact that I can do that and that might actually be a thing that happens is pretty cool.
Yeah, and say you want that feeling like someone's gone shopping with their parents, gone to game, picked out yours, and is on his way back, flicking through the manual and all that, to see if he can see what there is. Does the physical come with a manual? Actually, I'm assuming it does, because usually a lot of physical stuff like collectibles now, so they come with stuff.
That is a good question, and one that I don't want to answer unless I misspeak.
Fair
I
enough.
hope so.
I'm sure it says so on the Numskull site, so if anyone wants to... I think someone might have linked that already. There we go. So we can find that out there. So one quick thought I had, because I asked you about inspiration from video games, and I kind of skipped this question, but I'm going back to it now. Was there any inspiration outside of video games that you took?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because it's time travel, each world is in a different time period, and most of them are in a different geographical location as well. So I've done a lot of documentaries, historical ones, movies, TV shows, anything I can get my hands on to kind of inspire each of the worlds. I've watched, working on the Egyptian level, the amount of times I watched the Brendan Fraser Mummy film. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm a bit of a media sponge. I just spend all day absorbing myself in a place or a time, and then try and pour what I've learned into the game.
I'm just looking at the footage that's playing now, and it looks like it's London themed, fighting some lion with scissors on the River Thames, and I'm almost wondering if this is Sweeney Todd or Jack the Ripper inspired.
Pretty much. So you're looking at the Great Wen, which is Victorian London, and you're fighting a kangaroo called Drew the Ripper, he's been going around London stealing people's newspapers and cutting them up because they keep reporting bad things about him and his business.
The monster, the absolute monster,
has to be stopped.
Has to be stopped.
Must be free.
So we're coming towards the end of our segment, but I just had a few questions I wanted to ask before we close this off. And the first one is about just thinking forward ahead after Clive N Wrench finally releases at the end of this year. Is there any plans to, what's your plans? Are you going to focus on a completely new game? After all, it's been 10 years, this one, in development, so it might be something you want to move on from, or is it something that you think you might build up the franchise a bit more, build up the IP, see if you want to make a spin-off or something, or go straight into a sequel? Or do you think you're sort of done with this, like you've released your magnum opus game and now you're ready to retire from game development and focus on something else entirely? I was curious what your thoughts are.
I think it depends on reception of the game.
Okay.
Like if people really like it, then I have a ton of ideas. And in fact, I'll give you the clue that it's a game about time travel, and there may be some hints throughout the game if you look hard enough about what might be coming.
Okay.
But of course, if the game comes out and nobody likes it, then I'll probably move on to doing something else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although,
but if it goes well, then yes, there's plans for more in that universe.
Nice.
10 years is a long time, and there's plenty of ideas that have been shelved for now.
Yeah, otherwise they might have come 20 years if you're adding every little idea you got into your mind.
Yep, self-restraint is key.
Yeah. So So, all right, to close this off, we got one more soon. James Stars, very very soon. We're going to close off the interview now. There's just one last set of questions that we always ask guests, usually like developers and stuff, when they come on. We're big on the Super Smash Brothers stuff on our website, and so I was curious if Smash Brothers was a game franchise that you were familiar with, and if so, what was your favorite one, and who was your favorite fighter from Super Smash Brothers?
I'd say casually acquainted with, unfortunately. But I mean, purely because as far as characters go, they're some of my favorites. Banjo and Kazooie would be probably my top currently in Smash.
Okay, yeah, I suppose that makes sense looking at Clive N Wrench.
Yeah, I'm a big Banjo fan.
And then the last question, again related to Smash Brothers. If you could have a choice of any character not from Clive N Wrench, because I think that would be the obvious one, who could get added into Smash, who would you think you'd like to see?
Okay, can I give two answers? One realistic and one not so much.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, so the unrealistic choice, Sir Daniel Fortescue from Medieval.
That's an interesting choice.
Which is a first party Sony property, which is probably never going to happen. But also my favorite game, so there's a little bit of bias. And then the more realistic choice, I would agree with probably what you were saying at the end of John's segment before, with Crash. It just makes sense that if you were going to go, more towards Sony, obviously not first party, but fairly close for some of its life. That makes a lot of sense. And with the new game coming out, I could also see some of those new masks with their abilities coming in handy for some unique mechanics.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that would be a cool one. And Medieval is a very good game. I'm a big fan. Did you play the remake of that?
I did. I loved it. I got to play it a little bit early for a review as well,
nice.
And that was great. Fantastic job.
Hopefully they remake Medieval 2, because I never finished that. And I've been meaning to wanting to play it for a while.
We're campaigning for it. We're begging them to do it. So here's hoping.
Fingers
Medieval
crossed.
2.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob, for joining me and talking about Clive N Wrench. It looks very good. I'm always up for 3D platforms, and this looks like one of the better ones, especially from the indie scene, which can always be hit or miss. But you could definitely tell that it's had 10 years of thought and care put into it.
Well, thank you for having me on and for the kind words. And thank everyone who donated as well during the time we've been chatting.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you as well for that. We're nearly hitting $1,000. We're only 15 away, which is exciting. I'm gonna have to get one of my co-hosts to come and help me update the goals if we reach that.
Yeah, the stretch goal. That's great.
Yeah, it's so good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Sunday, and hopefully we can hear more about Clive N Wrench sometime soon.